Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon when you're watching or viewing this webinar. My name is Dave Nagel, and I'm really excited to have the chance to share some thoughts and ideas with my great friends and colleagues in Rutherford County Schools around John Hattie's visible learning mind frames, the beliefs that underpin everything we do in our profession as educators. A lot of you I had the privilege and chance to meet and talk to back when we did our Visible Learning Foundation Day back in July with Dr. B.R. Jones. And so for some, this is going to be a review of visible learning mind frames, and for others, it might be an introduction to not only the mind frames, but also myself. Jumping right in, and I'm going to come back to these after we do a little bit of logistics and setting the stage with some success criteria pieces. But one of the things John Hattie reminds us of, and it's profound, and I think we can agree with it, that most of us come into this profession with the belief as the best way to be fill in the blank: a third grade teacher, a biology teacher, a math teacher, a principal, a guidance counselor. And the longer those beliefs go unchecked, the longer those beliefs kind of stay with us and haven't been challenged, they become solidified in our minds as the best way to do things. What he says, at times our beliefs have to be challenged to look at what are the beliefs and mind frames we would need to have to best impact student learning. And so that's what this session is going to highlight, his now 10 mind frames that I'm going to walk us through and have you a chance to interact with them a little bit and kind of guide maybe some discussion, hopefully in a group setting with maybe your entire school, or at least possibly with your professional learning community. A little bit about myself. I'm very honored and fortunate to work for Corwin now, and I'm presenting visible learning with them, but I was fortunate to be certified in visible learning at a previous company, and so I've had the privilege now twice to go deep into John Hattie's work. But prior to that, I've been in education now for 18 years, and I've spent most of that time as a practitioner in a secondary setting. I was a middle and high school science teacher, and then a middle and high school administrator in a very large district in Indiana. Do want to offer the opportunity to make this as interactive as possible. Obviously, we're not in an interactive webinar setting where you could be chatting with me in the moment, but please, anytime throughout our work and dialogue and time in Rutherford County, no matter when that conversation begins or ends when we're doing the on-site work, please email me any questions, or if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow there. But I want to make sure that you have the ability to connect and interact, and certainly some of you I'm going to work very directly with as I get a chance and privilege to see everybody again in August and in November with Dr. Jones. But even if not, if you're not in that first group, hopefully you feel open to share any thoughts with me. I want to go through our learning intentions for this webinar that should take about 20 to 25 minutes, but there's going to be times where you could stop and pause it and interact with your colleagues. But to describe how living out the visible learning mind frames will promote both individual and collective teacher efficacy, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment. Understand the importance of how the mind frames and beliefs really do underpin our actions. I've mentioned that once already. And how your PLC, your data team, whatever you call your collaborative team, and I know there's PLC work that's deeply embedded in Rutherford County Schools, to have that group develop an awareness of which visible learning mind frames might you need to focus on a little bit more that can drive more impact into your collaborative actions this fall. And that could be at a grade level, at a team level, or at a building leadership team. Success criteria then for you to reach those learning intentions is that you would be able to articulate several mind frames of visible learning and what actions do exemplify them, and then determine which one or two mind frames might need to be a focus for your collaborative team to develop into not this spring, but this coming fall and spring into the school year. One of the things that you see that was accompanying the webinar that's been sent out is a working handout, just something to kind of guide your discussion and dialogue. And so as I walk through each one of the mind frames, you might want to pause the recording and jot some notes and ideas down. But you have a chance to work through each one of the mind frames I'm going to speak to. And then I'm hoping that there's a opportunity for your collaborative team or your PLC to engage in some dialogue afterwards where you would develop possibly a mind frame or two to focus on this fall. What are some committed actions? And then what are some behaviors that you're going to commit to challenging? To say that if we're living out that mind frame, we would have to challenge that belief. We would have to challenge that action because it doesn't line up with our current belief. As a review, to remember one of the things Hattie kind of has shown us in all of his research now, which comes over 50 years of synthesizing educational research, but also encompassing over 400,000 or close to close to a half a billion students, the average effect of everything we do in our schools is 0.4. And so a way to think about that is 0.4 is around a year's growth for a year's time. So what he's saying is that we should be looking for things that are in the zone of desired effects or above 0.4 or above average. And another kind of just thought and to consider to frame our conversation today, out of everything we do in our schools that impacts student learning, students are the most in charge. They hold the key. But within a classroom, within a school, it's the teachers. The classroom teachers are most responsible and have the most power to impact student learning. And so when we think about these beliefs and mind frames, they matter for all of us, for principals, for school leaders, but they really matter for our classroom teachers. And so from an administrative standpoint, how do we help set the environment to help develop and promote these mind frames? And in a teacher setting, how do we make sure we're developing our own, but also making sure that the peers we work with, we challenge their beliefs at times if we need to, and we hope that they will challenge ours. And we can take a lot of the current research around PLCs and around beliefs and go dig even further. And John Hattie says to research means to search again. And a quote from Smiley where he mentions perceptions and beliefs were the most significant predictors of change. And I think we can believe this. If we really believe that workout plan is going to get me my desired goals, and I'm really going to push for that, I'm more inclined to follow through with that workout or go through it on day 3 and 4 when it gets hard. So when we really think about our perceptions and beliefs, they're really going to drive whether or not we're willing to change, and not change for change's sake, but make sure that we're monitoring our actions to make the right adjustments in terms of how we change. I've cited several researchers here, and I think we could actually take the word teachers out. Humans, we embrace evidence that supports our beliefs more than evidence that contradicts them. If I want to go to a restaurant and I've been looking at going there for a while and I go to the Yelp reviews and I see there's 9 of them and 7 of them are positive and 2 are negative, there's a pretty good chance I'm going to want to validate the positive results more than the ones that were negative. But what if the 2 negatives were that somebody there got sick and maybe even died of botulism? Those would be pretty important ones to view as negative. So my point is that we sometimes as teachers and educators, and this includes Dave, this includes all of us, might embrace evidence that we believe supports how we believe and maybe push away the ones that don't. The mind frames will help us not do that. They will help us embrace all the evidence so we make better decisions in terms of how our actions will impact student learning. And with that said, I want to talk just for a moment about the power of collective teacher efficacy, the new number 1 influence of John Hattie, 1.57. So if 0.4 is the average, 1.57 would be 4 times the average effect, or in a sense, almost 4 years growth in 1 year's time. But one thing about collective teacher efficacy, it's not just we believe when we come together as a PLC that we're going to do better and we're going to get all of our students to grow and improve. But one of the things that will significantly drive that is applying new learning. Teachers have to have the opportunity to apply new knowledge. They need to get good at things. And so when we're in any of our professional development or learning sessions, we need to make sure that we allow our teachers and we challenge our teachers, and teachers yourselves have a chance to practice and apply strategies. And maybe we do that first in a whole group setting, and then we do it maybe in a PLC setting, and then we're willing to do it in the classroom, maybe with some peer feedback. But I think we all know with our students, if they only, learn when you demonstrate something on the board and they don't practice it on their worksheet or whatever we're having them do, probably not going to retain it. That type of learning practice to develop the mastery wouldn't be any different for our adult learners. So again, I'm going to come back to collective efficacy on another webinar, but it really drives a lot of what I think the mind frames embrace and tell us. And in terms of the PLC structure in Rutherford, this is a great place for this to start. I'm going to jump in now to the 10 mind frames. And for those of you that attended the session, we talked about these. For those of you who haven't, and maybe you had the Visible Learning for Teachers book, and John Hattie started off with 8. He's now added 2 more. So I'm going to mention all 10 of the mind frames. And I've kind of highlighted in blue the ones that he added after he wrote Visible Learning for Teachers, just in case you've looked at the book or read chapter 9 in Visible Learning for Teachers, but haven't necessarily heard more about those last 2. So I'm going to start one at a time, and I'm just going to encourage anytime throughout the webinar, if you need to pause the recording, to jot notes down, to have a discussion, please feel free. The number 1 mind frame, and one thing Hattie would say is maybe he really only had 1 mind frame and then he used 9 ways to elaborate on that one, and that was I'm an evaluator. The number 1 thing that I do as an educator is I evaluate not anybody else, but I evaluate myself. I evaluate what is my role, what am I doing, and what is the impact of my actions on student learning. It's one of the core messages of visible learning is know thy impact. So I am an evaluator. I'm monitoring what I do on a consistent basis and how it's impacting student learning. So as a classroom teacher, if I've provided homework assignments and tasks and I've given the right kind of feedback, am I seeing the results or changes in students? And if I haven't seen the changes, am I not giving enough feedback? If I'm not providing enough evidence? If I'm an administrator and I'm putting in professional learning sessions for my staff, but I'm not seeing the change in the classroom and their practices, that I haven't followed up enough, that I haven't supported them, that I haven't made it clear what the expectation is. So we're constantly monitoring what are the actions that I've taken and what is the impact that they're having on those that I work with to best impact student learning. And so these are some questions that the evaluators will ask, meaning not evaluators of other people, evaluators of themselves. How do I know if this is working? And I think that's an important one. A lot of times in our profession, we want to know if it worked or not. And so many things that we teach students are conceptual. You don't get main idea. You develop an understanding of that concept over time. Certainly there are some, closed skills like 5 times 5 is 25. That one's really not debatable. But whether or not students can apply their math fact knowledge into deeper level problem solving, that happens over time. Where have I seen others do this? Where can I make some comparisons? And that one to the bottom right, what would convince me that I'm wrong? What's the evidence I would seek to know that maybe what I said or what I'm doing isn't working? And that's one of the core questions of an evaluator. They will actually seek negative evidence. Because far too often, we don't see what is underneath. Far too often with our students, we may not see that breakthrough that they're about to have because we've assessed in a certain way. And so we're really looking for what is that deeper level learning that we want students to demonstrate that might happen over time. Same thing with our staff. They don't always put together connections of learning from last year and initiatives from this year. And so we have to invest more time to make sure we don't just check on the surface, but we look to go deep. The next mind frame I'm going to speak to is a change agent. And to summarize, a change agent, they really have 2 attributes. The first one is they do not lament. They don't focus and dwell on the challenges. They don't ignore them, but they don't live in a world of learned helplessness. And the other thing that they do is they innovate. And innovation doesn't mean we plug it in. And innovation could be going into your filing cabinet and blowing dust off a game or an activity that you used to use 5 or 10 years ago, and now you realize I got a student who's struggling with a concept, and actually this actually might work. You will make those adjustments anytime if you think it will lead to deeper levels of learning. And think about how important this is in a PLC setting. When our conversations collectively focus on the challenges that we're facing versus the opportunities to address student learning and that end of the spectrum, it really balances out and could have a significant impact on efficacy. It doesn't mean that we're always holding hands and saying everything's rosy, because it's not. We acknowledge the challenge, but we don't dwell on them. And when we work together, and think about when I think about our football coaches and our athletic teams, and certainly band and choir. I think those educators are a great example of how efficacy comes together because they consistently work on identifying what the challenges are to then address them, whether it's how to develop a blocking scheme to handle a team who's got a tough defense, or to really work on a piece in band because we're struggling in a certain area and we have a competition coming up. We come together as adults to come up with the best strategies that will really challenge us and will really teeter where our efficacy flows. Assessment is feedback for me. The only reason we should ever assess a student and have them put pencil to paper is not to score them and not to grade them. It's to give them feedback. But more importantly, it's to help me as an educator know what to do next. When we go to our doctor, do they give us a bunch of tests and then assess us? Or do they assess us first and then determine what tests we need? The only reason why I assess students is so I know what to do next. Now, that doesn't mean we can't put it in the grade book. The purpose of assessing students is for me first to know what I need to do next as a teacher. Talk about learning more than teaching. And knowing that PLCs are such a big embedded piece here in Rutherford, and certainly with Robert Eaker and all the work you've done there. But Horn and Little are some researchers that are some foundational elements around PLCs. And they talk about that when we're looking at learning and we're having those conversations in a PLC setting, it must revolve around 3 things. It must revolve around the teachers and, of course, the students, but also the content, but how we use the content. We're not teaching To Kill a Mockingbird. we're trying to get the students to learn and understand about complex characters. And we're going to use To Kill a Mockingbird to do that. So that might drive how we focus more on how they look how Atticus Finch developed throughout the course of the story, or how Jem developed, or how Scout developed as children of a single parent. And then students kind of resonate with that or not. In the next unit, I might talk about complex characters again, but my focus isn't the content. My focus is on the skill or the concept, and I use the content to drive the learning. And I think most of us can kind of realize that subtle shift and how important that could be when we're thinking about how we deliver instruction, but more importantly, how we monitor the learning of it. I enjoy challenge. Now, I put the word we in there because when we talk about the structures in Rutherford and how these mind frames get lived out, they're going to get lived out in a PLC setting. So we embrace this is a tough profession. No matter how the students are in terms of their academics or their socioeconomic status, anything else, they're going to bring challenges. Students of poverty bring different challenges than students maybe of affluency. Sometimes we have students that are more affluent and actually a little bit more proficient, but they're more apathetic and they don't challenge themselves. And students that are behind at times and things bring different challenges. But we embrace that and that collective responsibility, that positive peer interdependence creates pressure and accountability. There should be pressure amongst PLC teams to support one another, to eliminate some of that isolation that happens in our profession far too often. So when we acknowledge a challenge, embrace it, and then say, how can we collectively come up with strategies? I think we all know how lonely at times this profession is. And for those of us in Rutherford that are living on a PLC that meets regularly, I think most of you, if you didn't have that prior in your career like I did early on, how much we really embrace the opportunity to come together and have peers that will share and help us with strategies. We inform others about the language of learning. We have a shared understanding, and that starts with a couple pieces. One is that we communicate to students the success criteria. They know exactly what it looks like to be successful. And then we have to communicate that to our fellow peers so we're in agreement, but also to the parents. And we don't use edubabble. We try and use the language that we can all understand. And I make a lot of sports metaphors, but I promise that the high school football coach, as he should, will demand and expect the JV and the junior high to use the same cadence, same blocking scheme. In band, I'm sure there's some terms that students use so when they develop in those programs, they don't get confused. I challenge us to say English and math and science, same kind of concept. We have a program of this in the science arena in Rutherford. So we're using the same terms and same understanding there. So I inform all about the language of learning. Developing positive relationships is essential for one simple reason. The more I have a positive relationship with you, the safer it will be to make mistakes. I want you to feel safe making mistakes. I want you to come to me with challenges. I want you to acknowledge that, hey, I might need some help here. One of my comments to the team back in August was, we've all been there where maybe somebody says to a teacher, hey, I'm going to observe your classroom tomorrow. And the teacher says, no, I'm not ready. I've heard that statement. And my comment then, tongue in cheek, is, what if my son's in your class? Well, what are you not ready for? What I challenge the administrators, though, is if the teacher says that, what they're really saying is, I don't trust you. I don't trust you because I'm afraid to make a mistake. Wouldn't we want teachers to go to administrators and say, hey, I have a lesson that might screw up, but I would love for you to be there and give me some feedback, and I'm not worried about being evaluated for making a mistake. Same thing has to happen with our students where they feel safe telling the teacher, I don't get it. I need to turn my assignment early so you can tell me what I'm doing wrong, but I'm not going to be penalized then on my grade because I just didn't learn it in that time frame. So we develop those relationships so making mistakes is a safe thing. That's what's critical. A few more. We engage in dialogue, not monologue. We listen to our students. And then in PLC settings, as Little describes here, we have fine-grained discourse around learning. And we don't just look at scores and data. We look at the actual student work. We really dig into our assessments to go, okay, it's not that they got 80%, but how well did they do on that concept? What is the piece that they might be missing? What is a misconception that they're having so we can change our instruction? So we don't focus on just a final grade or a score. We're really looking at what is the learning targets we were trying to address and how are the students developing towards those, or if they're getting them, what is their next learning step? So we do more listening than talking, which on this webinar, I'm not doing any listening. I'm only talking. So I I not only acknowledge that, but that's why I've asked and encouraged, and I'll put my email up at the end for you to give me some feedback, and I want to hear your thoughts. So the last two that were not listed in the Visible Learning for Teachers book, first one is learning is hard work. And as teachers, one of the things we have to do is unlearn things. One of the traits of the school I was working at recently that listed for the traits of an effective learner was the ability to focus and be resilient and be resourceful. And they talked about being resourceful is different in 2016 than it was in 2000 or even in 2005. Being resourceful is going to Google and getting that quick answer to then apply it in a paper or in something else. And we used to think, well, maybe that was cheating. Not at all. Students have access to more information than we did or that they did 10 or 15 years ago. And that's dissonance for teachers because we've taught maybe a certain way. And we might have to learn new practices and unlearn some of the things we've done before or what we believe. And three things that promote the mind frame of hard work: perseverance, concentration, and deliberate practice. Students have to deliberately practice. Teachers have to deliberately practice. When we look at this concept applied at the elementary level, math times tests are actually at times detrimental to learning. What I mean by that is if I, as a student, am just trying to get as many right as possible in 3 minutes, I might make some bad mistakes because anything I don't get completed in 3 minutes is wrong. What would be better is we say, listen, you have to get every one you try right because 72 out of 72 is better than 84 out of 100. So I got 72 out of 72 right today. And then the next day I got 76 out of 76. And to tell the students, if you make more than 3 mistakes, it doesn't count. We want them to get everyone right. And then eventually, not only will they get them all right in the amount of time we want, but they will not make bad mistakes. We wouldn't tell our free throw or athlete to shoot free throws to shoot them fast just to try and make as many as he can. We would want him to be deliberate. Because once that deliberate practice is down, we can then accelerate after that skill has been learned. And then the last one that John Hattie actually added this past year, and I think it's so applicable to Rutherford County, is I collaborate. Now, every one of Hattie's mind frame starts with I because it has to start with the individual. I collaborate. Now, I need my peers, so I have to collaborate with others, but I look forward to collaboration for one core reason, because I want to learn from you. I want to learn from others. I want to give to others. I desire to be in a collaborative setting so I can become a better educator, so I can develop my craft and I can give to others. So I don't go to that PLC meeting because I was told to. I go there because I want to learn. Which also means as leaders, we have to provide structures in those PLC settings to where teachers have the chance to learn and they have the right amount of structured freedom. So for example, maybe we say, here's the 8 tasks that really must be accomplished this semester. You must administer 3 common formative assessments and evaluate them. You must, collaboratively score student work a certain time. We give the teachers some freedom so that they can look at their schedule and say, when will we get these tasks done? But it's not about sitting in the seat for that 45 or 55 or 85-minute period. And maybe at times, teachers have the ability to collaborate outside of school. We have Google Docs. We have electronic ways where we can put things there and say, listen, that must be in the Google Doc by Monday because we're going to meet on Thursday and we want everyone to have a chance to review what we've done. Somebody looked at some strategies for students that are struggling. Somebody added some strategies for the students that are a little bit more proficient. And so we collaborate to learn, but we do it in a way that isn't seat time monitored. It's task-oriented monitored. It allows the teachers to have the right amount of freedom to monitor their learning. So I hope that was enough of an overview, and certainly I'm encouraging questions, but what I'm going to encourage any group watching this now to do is to complete the activity on page 2 of your handout. And it's just a simple way where you might pick one of these mind frames, why that could be a focus area for your PLC, what are some committed actions to develop this mind frame collaboratively, what are some things we're going to do, and what are some actions that we're going to challenge? What are some beliefs that we're going to come up with, say that if we really believe that, we have to stop doing that. If we really believe that we want to create that positive environment for making mistakes, students could have an amnesty day once a month. Once a month where there's a period of time where if you've missed some things and doggone it, for whatever reason, we're going to give you a chance to make it up and not penalize you. Why? Because you're human and it's better to have you caught up than behind. And that's just one simple example. That if we really believe that, then we would have to honor that amnesty day. So if you have thoughts or questions on how to develop more of these, please let me know. I have some examples that I'm going to send to Trey. but I certainly encourage you as a team to maybe come up with one or two now that you've had a chance to watch this webinar. I really appreciate your time. I will see many of you on August 30th. Some of you I won't have a chance to see on that day, and some of you might be watching this after August 30th. But there's my email, and please visit corwin.com or visiblelearningplus.com for more information. And then if you have the Visible Learning for Teachers book, please read or review Chapter 9, and there's definitely more information there on a deeper level around the mind frames. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon or evening and a great start to the school year, and I look forward to seeing everyone soon. Best to all in Rutherford County Schools.